Thanks for visiting naunews.org. Today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite subjects, North American Union. Over the last several days I've been doing some research and coming across comments still on videos related to North American Union and deep integration and things of that nature, where people are still stating that the North American Union idea is dead. And from my perspective, after doing research into the North American Union agenda for many, many years now, I've only seen accomplishments and incremental steps leading us towards their idea of a North American Union. From what I've seen so far, the Security and Prosperity Partnership didn't really die. What they did was accomplish their goal, and their goal was to create a framework in which the North American Union could be established. Once that framework was developed, the government from Canada and the United States and Mexico have been working overtime to ensure that our policies and laws and procedures are being harmonized and integrated together in order to prepare the three countries for an easier consolidation or merger. Back in 2005, during the Security and Prosperity Partnership Summit, the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, and in Canada, the CCCE, or Canadian Council of Chief Executives, created a document, and you see it on the screen here, called Building a North American Community. They created an independent task force between the two and developed this paper, which they submitted to the Security and Prosperity Partnership. At the time, it was Vicente Fox, President Bush, and it would have been Paul Martin here in Canada that created the Security and Prosperity Partnership. And later to take over for Paul Martin was Stephen Harper. During the summit, they were asked to create a framework to develop sort of a step-by-step instruction on how they could further integrate or build this North American community by the Council on Foreign Relations. This is the document that they submitted back in 2005, and I'll just scroll through so you can take a look at some of this. And we'll just take a look at some of the people that were involved in developing this framework. We have John P. Manley. He is now the Chief Executive Officer, or CEO, for the CCCE in Canada. Vice Chair, former CEO of the CCCE, Thomas P. D'Aquino. And we have Robert A. Pastor. He's been a big-time advocate of North American Union. A lot of you should be aware of his work. What I want to show you is, getting back to my point on how the North American Union agenda has not died, but rather everything that the framework has called for has come to pass. They've accomplished that goal. And recently, Stephen Harper and Barack Obama signed a common security perimeter agreement deal between the two that would create a common security perimeter for around the whole of North America. Some of you may know this deal as the Beyond the Borders Agreement. We're just going to get into, I'm going to show you on page 30 of this document. They have some recommendations as to where the government should go next. And as we see here, what should we do now? And right here it says establish a common security perimeter by 2010. The governments of Canada, Mexico, and the United States should articulate as their long-term goal a common security perimeter for North America. In particular, the three governments should strive toward a situation in which a terrorist trying to penetrate our borders will have an equally hard time doing so, no matter which country he elects to enter first. We believe that these measures should be extended to include a commitment to common approaches toward international negotiations on the global movement of people, cargo, and vessels. Like free trade a decade ago, a common security perimeter for North America is an ambitious but achievable goal that will require specific policy, statutory, and procedural changes in all three nations. They also call for the development of a North American border pass. The three countries should develop a secure North American border pass with biometric identifiers. This document would allow its bearers expedited passage through customs, immigration, and airport security throughout the region. The program would be modeled on the U.S.-Canadian Nexus and the U.S.-Mexican Sentry programs, which provide smart cars to allow swifter passage to those who pose no risk. Only those who voluntarily seek, receive, and pay the cost for security clearance would obtain a border pass. The pass would be accepted at all border points within North America as a complement to, but not a replacement for, national identity documents or passports. Well, we've seen that happen in Canada, where the WITI requirements for our driver's license required us to create a enhanced driver's license. In the enhanced driver's license features biometric information and an RFID chip. And that is acceptable identification to cross the land borders between Canada and the United States. So that has already been accomplished. The establishment of a common security perimeter by 2010, well, they were a little behind schedule on this. This is a major step towards North American Union and consolidating the three nations. Back in February 4th, 2011, Barack Obama and Stephen Harper finally came out and announced that on television that they were going to establish this common security perimeter. So they're a little off target, but not too far off. So that is already in the works right now, and if you watch the remainder of this video, you'll see some footage of that announcement. Develop a unified North American border action plan. The closing of the borders following the 9/11 attacks awakened all three governments to the need for rethinking management of the borders. Intense negotiations produced the bilateral Smart Borders agreements. Although the two borders are different and may in certain instances require policies that need to be implemented at two speeds, cooperation by the three governments in the following areas would lead to a better result than a dual bilateral approach. Harmonize visa and asylum regulations, including convergence of the list of visa waiver countries. Harmonize entry screening and tracking procedures for people, goods, and vessels, including integration of name-based and biometric watch lists. And I believe it was CTV News that came out and announced from a source that they had that the governments of Canada, United States, and Mexico were seeking to track all travelers in real time.
Sources say the leaders want negotiators to conclude a sweeping deal within the year. It would mean joint border inspection facilities to speed up the movement of goods, the relocation of U.S. food inspectors at Canadian plants and vice versa, greater sharing of intelligence, and harmonizing regulations on everything from food to manufactured goods, cooperation on building of bridges, roads, and rail links, and greater use of biometrics to track travelers in real time.
And this is exactly what they're calling for here, tracking procedures for people. Harmonize exit and export tracking procedures, fully share data about the exit and entry of foreign nationals, and jointly inspect container traffic entering North American ports, building on the Container Security Initiative. And that's exactly what you'll hear Obama and Harper talking about in the footage to follow this video. So that's already something that they're working on as well. Expand border infrastructure. While trade has nearly tripled across both borders since the Canadian-US Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA were implemented, border customs facilities and crossing infrastructure have not kept pace with this increased demand. Even if 9/11 had not occurred, trade would be choked at the border. There have been significant new investments to speed processing along both the Canadian, U.S., and Mexican, U.S. borders, but not enough to keep up with the burgeoning demand and additional security requirements. The three governments should examine the options for additional border facilities and expedite their construction, in addition to allowing for continued growth in the volume of transborder traffic. Such investments must incorporate the latest technology and include facilities and procedures that move as much processing as possible away from the border. So have we seen the Canadian and American government implement these suggestions by the CFR to expand border infrastructure? Indeed we have. Just recently, the Canadian and American borders have received updates to their technology to utilize this new ID system and to take advantage of the RFID capabilities, which allow them to identify all travelers before they even reach the physical land border crossings. So have the three governments added additional border facilities? Indeed they have. Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced funding for Canada's inland port system, which is being built in Winnipeg right now. It's called Centerport Canada, and it's part of the NAFTA superhighway that he once said didn't exist. That is an inland port system which is going to allow them to bypass multi-inspections as they cross over traditional sovereign borders between Canada, United States, and Mexico.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to announce that the Government of Canada is making a substantial contribution to the further development of Winnipeg's inland port. The port is an ambitious, far-sighted initiative, a massive transportation, trade, manufacturing, distribution, warehousing, and logistics center on 20,000 acres of industrial land here in northwest Winnipeg, adjacent to the James Richardson International Airport. Under our Building Canada plan, which is the largest national infrastructure renewal effort in half a century, our government is partnering with the province and Centerport Canada to build Centerport Canada Way. This 4-lane divided high-speed transportation corridor will enable the safer and more efficient movement of goods between northwest Winnipeg's major intermodal and distribution facilities.
So indeed, our governments have implemented the CFR recommendations. Here they state, again, and include facilities and procedures that move as much processing as possible away from the borders. That is the purpose of the inland port system, and it's also revealed by Dr. Jerome Corsi that the NAFTA superhighway is back on in the United States, so there's been some recent development there, and it's not surprising that to hear that, because Canada is moving forward with their part of the NAFTA superhighway, creating our Canadian hub of that system. Getting further on in the document, we see the CFR recommending law enforcement and military cooperation to our governments. Security cooperation among the three countries should also extend to cooperation on counterterrorism and law enforcement, which would include the establishment of Tri-National Threat Intelligence Center, the development of Tri-National Ballistics and Explosives Registration, and joint training for law enforcement officials. Not too many years after this document came out, the Canadian government on television announced that Canada and the United States would be creating joint task force under the program called ShipRider. ShipRider was an initiative, sort of like a pilot project, to test the waters and see how easily the Canadian and American border enforcement teams could integrate and harmonize with each other.
Yesterday, we concluded an agreement on integrated cross-border maritime law enforcement operations, commonly referred to as ShipRider. ShipRider will allow both countries to police our shared maritime border together by joining together with the United States, we will be better positioned to crack down on crime taking place in our shared waterways, like the smuggling of illegal drugs, tobacco contraband, and guns. And no longer will criminals be able to rely on an imaginary legal line in the water to escape the long arm of law enforcement.
And that has led to other programs now aimed or specified in the Beyond the Borders Agreement. So they're just further implementing these recommendations. Also, recently there was an announcement on the news stating that a lot of the Canada and US border facilities were going to be harmonized and integrated together, where border officials basically from both sides would be sharing infrastructure. So that has also been implemented. Although there are several other recommendations the CFR makes to our governments, the last one I would like to point out is this one here called Creating a North American Economic Space. They go on to say the signing of NAFTA ushered in a new era of expanded opportunities for trade and investment across North America. The Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement was the foundation stone for NAFTA, providing the concept, framework, and substance for the subsequent trilateral agreement. NAFTA eliminated, not merely reduced, tariffs on all industrial goods, and in most cases did so in less than a decade. It guaranteed unrestricted agricultural trade within 15 years between Mexico and the United States, the first trade agreement to remove all such barriers. It opened trade across a broad range of services and provided the highest standard of protection in the world for intellectual property. It set clear rules to protect investors and create a framework that encourages transparency, respect for property, and adherence to the rule of law. That's questionable. Since this agreement entered into force, trade among the three countries have more than doubled in value, and intra-regional investment has grown even faster. Mexico's export have climbed more than 250%, and Canada's have more than doubled. Canada by itself has become the largest customer of 39 American states. Mexico is the first or second largest customer of 22 states, and the second largest overall. North America is now the largest free trade area in the world. NAFTA allowed duty-free access within the region, but because of different rates changed by each country on imports from other countries, it required cumbersome proof of North American origin in order to qualify for NAFTA access. These rules can raise transaction costs to the point that some shippers choose to pay the multilateral tariff rate instead. In addition, although the dispute resolution mechanisms provided by NAFTA have proven a reliable means for resolving most trade disputes, they have been incapable of dealing with important and controversial problems regarding softwood lumber, sugar, and a few other products. In short, important work remains to be done in creating a common economic zone through the elimination of remaining tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade within North America. The three countries must also expand cooperation on trade-related areas, including border and transportation infrastructure, which we just covered, a concerted effort to reduce the many regulatory gaps and inconsistencies that hamper the flow of trade in North America, and coordinated investment in North America's human capital, both through education and training and through improved labor mobility within the continent. And that all has to do with the thinning of the borders and improve labor mobility. That's something you may want to look into a little further, this labor mobility idea. So basically what the CFR is asking for here is the creation of a North American economic space, or the creation of a customs union with Canada and the United States.
We need to deepen economic integration by moving towards a customs union with a common external tariff.
Something that Hillary Clinton even denied just shortly before Obama and Stephen Harper announced the Common Security Perimeter deal. This was an interview she did on CTV, and she basically said that they're not looking at that right now. But shortly after this interview, Obama and Harper step up on stage and basically introduce to the Canadian and American public exactly that. So I'm going to play a little bit of that clip right now, and then we're going to come back and talk a bit more about the common security perimeter and how the North American Union has not died.
And if we can figure it out in the Arctic, can we expand that out and talk about the continent? You know that for many years there was discussion of perhaps a customs union between Canada and the United States as a way of thinning the border, because all that's happened is that the border, as you know, has gotten thicker and thicker. Can you foresee the day when you might, your country may look at the idea of a customs union as a way of perimeter security for North America as opposed to Fortress America?
Well, we're not looking at that right now. There are those who are writing about it and suggesting it.
I would only add that this is a bilateral issue on which we meet and discuss regularly with our Canadian colleagues, so it's not surprising that it wouldn't be on the agenda of a trilateral meeting such as this. We are very conscious of the stakes because, as Lawrence said, we want this to enhance not just security, but trade and commercial activity, business connections, people-to-people travel, recreation, tourism. For 8 years I represented New York, which has a long and very friendly border with Canada, and I am very acutely aware of the importance of this most significant relationship along our long and peaceful border. So we are, I think, committed to discussing and arriving at conclusions about how best to deal with the environment in which we find ourselves today, to try to create a border that, yes, protects Canadians and Americans, but also enables the kind of ongoing interactions that are critical to both nations.
So we see a lot of the media asking the question, are we thickening or thinning the border? Hillary Clinton knows that the agenda is to thin the border. She just doesn't want to come right out and tell us how they plan on doing that. The method that they're going to use is the new ID system and the RFID and biometric technology. That is the method to thin the borders, and which is why we're starting to see a lot of inland inspections where American citizens are being asked to produce identification and being stopped at checkpoints.
What's up, man?
How you doing today, sir?
Good.
You a U.S. citizen?
That's my business.
Well, it's our business to ask. Are you a U.S. citizen or not?
You can ask, that's fine.
And you have to answer me, or I have to detain you until you can either tell me that you're a U.S.
Well, I don't have to answer you because I have rights as an American.
Sir, go ahead and pull over there. We're behind that other vehicle if you do me a favor.
No thanks. I'd like to just go on my way.
You can go on your way as soon as you tell me if you're a U.S. citizen.
Well, you know, I didn't know that I have to go around proving that I'm a citizen. Do I need to, like, show my papers like the Nazis, or... I'm not... Am I immigrating somewhere, or... Is this Mexico, or...
United States. Just answer the question yes or no.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, is this Nazi Germany now? I have to show my papers?
As they mentioned, the idea is to move things away from the traditional border, and that's why the inspections are taking place some 50 to 100 miles away from any border at all. As we can see here in this document, they talk more about the RFID identification technology and the vicinity RFID system. This is the ability for them to track and trace you as you cross what used to be the traditional borders without having to stop. I'll just give you a little bit more information here. RFID infrastructure deployment. So they're basically outlining here when this technology is being implemented at which border. And we can see here that the enhanced driver's license is a basically harmonized ID system with Canada and the United States. It's called the same thing here as it is there. Here we have a Washington driver's license showing enhanced driver's license. So with the integrated ID system, that contains your threat assessment profile, your citizenship, and any other information that they want to use to build up that threat assessment profile is accessible to basically anybody that has a RFID reader or scanner, whether that be police or border patrol. So anywhere you go in North America, they're going to be able to know who you are and where you're going, basically. Your threat assessment profile will be used as a guide to how you should be treated when you are approached by police, by border patrol, or when crossing what used to be our traditional land borders. This is how the thinning process is going to work. As of 9/11, it is true we've only seen a thickening of the border, and we have to ask ourselves, was that self-inflicted or was that warranted? The Department of Homeland Security was established, and then after that they established the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, WHITI, which I mentioned earlier. And under WHITI, we've had to accommodate for American law in Canada and basically integrating and harmonizing this ID system. So the goal remaining in the CFR document that we're looking at here in this video remains to create this common security perimeter, and this ID system ties in with their ability to create a common security perimeter for the whole of North America. With thinned out borders and the agenda to create a common security perimeter, there has to be a way for government to be able to track and monitor the movement of people across North America. And this is exactly how they're going to do that with RFID and biometric technology. And this reminds me of an interesting interview I watched with Alan Gottlieb, and he had mentioned 9/11 was the catalyst for creating a North American Union, or for pushing for further integration and harmonization between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. I'll play a little bit of that clip for you.
There was very little, I think, in the way of discussion, even in the academy, about a North American community or deeper type of union until after 9/11, I think. I think it was 9/11 that was the provocative agent that brought about a discussion of deepening the structures, or deepening the arrangements, or deepening the rules.
So if you're not fully convinced that 9/11 actually went down the way the government says it did, that should raise even more concern on your part about these advancements that our government's taking to create this North American community. These are major steps. These are steps that affect national sovereignty, the ability for us to govern in the best interests of our own country. And they've used 9/11 all the way through as one of the main reasons to push this security agenda onto us. As we see here, this is a chairman's statement after they submitted the Creating a North American Community document to the SPP, the one that we've been following along in this video. This was a chairman's statement that was put out shortly after that document was released, and then we can see right in this document how important a role 9/11 played as far as their ability to advance this agenda. As they always like to say, they never let a good crisis go to waste. 9/11 was one of those opportunities that groups like the CFR, and in Canada the CCCE, used to push forward their agenda. As we can see here, shared security threats. Over the last decade, terrorist and criminal activity has underscored North America's vulnerability. All of the 9/11 terrorists succeeded in entering the United States directly from outside North America, but the arrest of a person in 1999 trying to cross the Canada-US border as part of a plot to bomb the Los Angeles airport shows that terrorists will also try to gain access to the United States through Canada and Mexico. I don't believe this is anything new. It's not particularly a reason to totally integrate and harmonize three countries together. We've been thus far handling these types of criminal activities just fine. Here again, we see after the 9/11 attacks, delays at the Canada-U.S. border prompted unplanned part shortages in both countries, costing manufacturing facilities millions of dollars an hour. This was mostly caused by new laws and policies that they were implementing at our borders. So if we ask ourselves who's creating this legislation, who's pushing these security agendas, and we can see right here the Council on Foreign Relations and their partners, the CCCE in Canada, which are made up of all the largest corporations in the United States and Canada. So we have the corporations basically dictating or suggesting, in this case, what our security agenda should be, laying out the framework to the government. And yet we also have them claiming that now that the borders are thicker, that we have to dismantle them and make them thinner via technology. This is your typical problem, reaction, solution type scenario where they themselves have created the problem. They wait for our reaction, and our reaction is there's too long of wait times at the border, it's difficult to get across the border, the security measures are unreasonable, where we act out and demand some type of change happen, and then they offer up the solution, which is to create a common security perimeter. In this very same document that I was showing here, they also mentioned the three countries should develop a secure North American border pass with biometric identifiers. This document would allow its bearers expedited passage through customs, immigration, and airport security throughout the region. Basically, they go on to say this will be particularly true if the three countries make genuine progress toward establishing a common security perimeter. So that is was the goal that was lined out in the framework, and as we can see, one by one, each of those recommendations has come to pass. So it would seem the creation of a common security perimeter was very important for the CFR. And we now see President Obama and Prime Minister Stephen Harper coming out and announcing exactly that. I'm going to get to that clip now and have a listen, and we'll be back to wrap up this conversation on North American Union.
We're launching a new effort to get rid of outdated regulations that stifle trade and job creation.
It is in both our interests to ensure that our common border remains open and efficient, but it is just as critical that it remains secure and in the hands of the vigilant and the dedicated. Just as we must continually work to ensure that inertia and bureaucratic sclerosis do not impair the legitimate flow of people, goods, and services across our border, so too we must up our game to counter those seeking new ways to harm us. And I say us, because as I have said before, a threat to the United States is a threat to Canada, to our trade, to our interests, to our values, to our common civilization. Canada has no friends among America's enemies, and America has no better friend than Canada. The declaration President Obama and I are issuing today commits our governments to find new ways to exclude terrorists and criminals who pose a threat to our peoples. It also commits us to finding ways to eliminate regulatory barriers to cross-border trade and travel, because simpler rules lead to lower costs for business and consumers and ultimately to more jobs. Shared information, joint planning, compatible procedures, and inspection technology will all be key tools. So we commit to expanding our management of the border to the concept of a North American perimeter, not to replace or eliminate the border, but, where possible, to streamline and decongest it. There is much work to do. The declaration marks the start of this endeavor, not the end. An ambitious agenda between two countries, sovereign and able to act independently when we so choose, according to our own laws and aspirations, but always understanding this, that while a border defines two peoples, it need not divide them. That is the fundamental truth to which Canadians and Americans have borne witness for almost 2 centuries. And through our mutual devotion to freedom, democracy, and justice at home and abroad, it is the example we seek to demonstrate for all others. You asked me about questions of energy, and yes, we did discuss the matter you raised. And let me just say this in that context. I think it is clear to anyone who understands this issue that the need of the United States for fossil fuels, far in excess of its ability to produce such energy, will be the reality for some time to come. And the choice that the United States faces in all of these matters is whether to increase its capacity to accept such energy from the most secure, most stable, and friendliest location it can possibly get that energy, which is Canada, or from other places that are not as secure, stable, or friendly to the interests and values of the United States.
Canadians will be asking how much of our sovereignty and our privacy rights will be given up to have more open borders and an integrated economy.
On the question of sovereignty, this declaration is not about sovereignty. We are sovereign countries who have the capacity to act as we choose to act. The question that faces us is to make sure we act in a sovereign way that serves Canada's interests. It is in Canada's interest to work with our partners in the United States to ensure that our borders are secure and ensure that we can trade and travel across them as safely and as openly as possible within the context of our different laws. And that is what we're trying to achieve here. You know, we share security threats that are very similar on both sides of the border. We share an integrated economic space where it doesn't make sense to constantly check the same cargo over and over again. If we can do that at a perimeter, if we can decongest the border, that's what we should be doing. If we can harmonize regulations in ways that avoid unnecessary duplication and red tape for business, these are things that we need to do.
So there you have it, Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Obama announcing the creation of a common security perimeter for North America. However, we all know by studying the CFR document that this is not their idea at all. This is not something that Obama and Harper have been striving to put together between themselves to create this easy border system that allows for the flow of goods and services to continue to cross our borders post 9/11. This is directly out of the CFR playbook as they outlined for the creation of a North American community. We heard Stephen Harper mention that this is not going to affect our sovereignty, that we will respect the laws of both countries but still work together. But in the same breath, he's mentioning that they're going to integrate and harmonize our laws and policies with the United States in every area possible. I ask you, how can we exercise our own laws when our laws are basically harmonized and integrated with the laws of the United States? In effect, you have a single law. Now, that doesn't sound like something that preserves sovereignty. It sounds like something that allows us to, or demands that we give up our sovereignty in order to participate with. If we sign an agreement with the United States and we decide to change a certain rule or policy or procedure at the border, how difficult is it going to be now that we're wrapped in with the United States in national security and with immigration and border policy? It's going to be a lot more difficult to go our own separate ways if we ever choose to do so than right now, where we exercise our sovereignty and our laws are not fully integrated at this point. So the creation of a North American Union is not far off. Lots of people are still coming out and writing about it. However, not too many people seem to be taking any interest in it. And we should all know that the creation of a North American Union is a globalist stepping stone towards a one world government system.
Want to break away from the break to take you now live to the White House to see him. President Obama, he has a visitor, Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, talking economy. Let's listen.
Stephen, I've got a trusted partner and I think he'll agree that perhaps no two nations match up more closely together or are woven together more deeply economically, culturally, than the United States and Canada. And that deep sense of interconnection, our shared values, our shared interests, infuse the work that we have done today, from supporting a resolution to the Eurozone crisis to moving ahead with the transition in Afghanistan, from deepening security cooperation here in the Americas to supporting reform and democratic transitions in the Middle East and North Africa. Our focus today, however, is on our highest priority, and my top priority as president, and that's creating jobs faster and growing the economy faster. And in this mission, Canada has a special role to play. As most of you know, Canada is our single largest trading partner, our top export market. And those exports, from cars to food, support some 1.7 million good-paying American jobs. Canada, in turn, is one of the top foreign investors in the United States, and that creates even more jobs and prosperity. And the Prime Minister and I are determined not just to sustain this trade, but to expand it, to grow it even faster. So we're creating even more jobs and more opportunity for our people. Canada is key to achieving my goal of doubling American exports and putting folks back to work. And the two important initiatives that we agreed to today will help us do just that. First, we're agreeing to a series of concrete steps to bring our economies even closer and to improve the security of our citizens, not just along our shared border, but beyond the border. Put simply, we're going to make it easier to conduct the trade and travel that creates jobs, and we're going to make it harder for those who would do us harm and threaten our security. For example, some 90% of all our trade, more than $1 billion in trade every single day, passes through our roads, our bridges, and our ports. But because of old systems and heavy congestion, it still takes too many products too long to cross our borders. And for every business, either Canadian or American, time is money. So we're going to improve our infrastructure. We're going to introduce new technologies. We're going to improve cargo security and screening, all designed to make it easier for our companies to do business and create jobs. And that, by the way, includes our small businesses, which create most of the new jobs here in America. And when they look to export, typically Canada is one of the most likely places they are to start getting a foothold in the global economy. So it's hugely important for our small and medium-sized businesses. Last year, more than 100 million people crossed our shared border, including lots of Canadians who, I'd note, spend more money in the United States than any other visitors. So I want to make a pitch. We want even more Canadians visiting the United States. And please spend more money here. We want to make it easier for frequent travelers and our business people to travel, and we're going to create a simplified entry-exit system. I'd add that along with better screening and sharing more information, this will help us be even smarter about our joint security, concentrating our resources where they're needed most, identifying real threats to our security before they reach our shores. The second thing we're doing is we're ramping up our effort to get rid of outdated, unjustified regulations that stifle trade and job creation. This is especially important in sectors like the auto industry, where so many cars and products are built on both sides of the border. But sometimes that's slowed down by regulations and paperwork that, frankly, just doesn't make sense. So we're going to strike a better balance with sensible regulations that unleash trade and job creation while still protecting public health and safety. And this builds on the efforts that we have here in the United States, led by Cass Sunstein at OIRA, where we're eliminating billions of dollars in costs from regulations. Now our two nations are going to be going further, streamlining, eliminating, and coordinating regulations, slashing red tape, and we're going to focus on several key sectors, including autos, agriculture, and healthcare. So this can be a win-win situation where not only are we making our regulatory systems more efficient in our respective countries, but we're also seeing greater convergence between our two countries. Even as we pursue these two new initiatives, the Prime Minister and I discussed our broader economic relationship. I'm pleased that Canada has expressed an interest in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Many of you accompanied me to the APEC meeting, where you know that this has generated a great deal of interest. So we look forward to consulting with Canada, as well as our TPP partners and others about how all of us can meet the high standards demanded by this trade agreement, and it can be, I think, a real model not only for the region but for the world. We did discuss the proposed Keystone XL pipeline, which is very important to Canada, and I think the Prime Minister and our Canadian friends understand that it's important for us to make sure that all the questions regarding the project are properly understood, especially its impact on our environment and the health and safety of the American people. And I assured him that we will have a very rigorous process to work through that issue. So we're going to continue to work as partners and as friends. And Stephen, on this day and in all the discussions that we have, I want to thank you again for your candor, your sense of common purpose, what you bring and your team brings to this partnership. It's been extraordinary, and I want to personally thank you for the progress that our team's made in these two very important announcements that we made today. I'm confident, by the way, that we are going to implement them diligently. We have folks like Secretary Napolitano from Department of Homeland Security and Cass Sunstein, who are going to be heading up our team and making sure that these things go into effect in a way that benefits both the Canadian people and the American people. And so, Stephen, to all the people of Canada, thank you. To you, thank you, and I wish everybody a wonderful holiday season.
Great. Well, thank you, Barack. Thank you for, first of all, our candid conversation today. As always, we always appreciate that. We appreciate all the work that's been done on this. I did mention Bob Hamilton, Simon Kennedy working on our side, but I do want to thank all the officials on both sides who have been working hard over very many months to do what is a very important initiative. And of course, I do want to thank you for your friendship, not just personally, Barack, but I know the friendship you feel for the entire nation of Canada, and we all do appreciate it. Merci, Barack. Mesdames et messieurs, c'est une journée historique. Today, we are pleased to announce ambitious agreements on perimeter security and economic competitiveness, as well as on regulatory cooperation. These agreements create a new, modern border for a new century. Together, they represent the most significant steps forward in Canada-U.S. cooperation since the North American Free Trade Agreement. The first agreement merges U.S. and Canadian security concerns.
So there you have it, folks. Now we have to sit back and ask ourselves, do we really want to be integrating Canadian national security with the national security agenda of the United States of America? Think about that. Do we really want the Department of Homeland Security in the way that they have been stripping the civil rights of their citizens, taking away their freedoms in the United States? Americans are fighting against that right now, and we're inviting it right into our front door. They have Predator drones, as I've shown, patrolling the Canada-U.S. border. They're integrating a harmonized ID system that contains biometric and RFID to track and trace all travelers in real time. They've announced that they're going to be sharing personal information with the United States. And they've also just announced that they're going to eliminate the multiple customs inspections of trucks and goods moving across the border. This is one of the main reasons why they had to institute the inland port system, so that they could have American customs officials inside Canadian territory with the authority to make arrests and to perform their duties, and so that the customs or the shipments can be pre-cleared for customs, allowing them to travel all the way from Canada deep down into Mexico without having to stop for multiple customs inspections. But at the same time, they claim that we have a national security issue and security threats like we've never had in the past. Therefore, we have to take these drastic measures, securing us and giving us a new ID system, while they strip away the amount of inspections that cargo and those type of container systems are going to be required to be subject to. So does less cargo inspection equal more security or less security? I think it's very easy to understand where this is all going and what agenda is being played out here. And it's definitely not for our prosperity. It's for their prosperity. And it's definitely not for our security. It's for their security. So when they tell us that this is for our security and our prosperity, we have to question who's giving up what, who has to benefit, who has the most to gain here giving up all these, giving up our sovereignty and our rights. Is it the people? Is it the corporations? Is it the government? Should be clear by now that the North American Union agenda is full on. It hasn't died, it's not gone anywhere. All it's done is change names and accomplish what they set out to do. And we should all know by now that a North American Union is a globalist stepping stone to a one-world government. They cannot hope to create a one-world government system if they cannot at least get, on this side of the pond, Canada, the United States, and Mexico to consolidate. If you're interested in more information on the North American Union, I would encourage you to visit naunews.org. That's naunewz.org. And you can simply click on mainstream media news articles where you'll find all the latest information as to what's going on in the North American Union agenda. Thanks for watching.